Have you ever silenced yourself, not out of fear, but because your words felt too heavy for the room? If so, you're not broken. You're thinking deeply in a world that rewards noise, and you're not alone. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most misunderstood minds in history, lived that silence too. He walked alone, not because he wanted to, but because few could walk where he wandered. In his solitude, he wrote words that echo even now, not loud, but sharp, not comforting, but true. And perhaps his most haunting line still whispers across time. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. A sentence not just to read, but to return to in the quietest hours of our lives. Absolutely. Here's the English version of the same emotionally deep and informative script, written in a narrative, cinematic style, with about 1,000 words, ideal for a long-form video. It blends biographical facts, philosophical contributions, emotional storytelling, and a sense of personal resonance with the viewer. Some people are not born to be understood in their time. They see too far, feel too deeply, and ask questions the world isn't ready to answer. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of them. He was born in 1844 in a quiet town in Germany, the son of a Lutheran pastor. His father died when Nietzsche was just 5 years old, leaving behind a silence that would follow him throughout his life. From a young age, he lived more in his mind than in the world. Books, music, long solitary walks, these were his companions. At only 24, he became the youngest professor ever appointed at the University of Basel. Brilliant, precise, revered. But academia couldn't contain his spirit. Nietzsche wasn't here to teach what was already known. He came to ask what had been forgotten. And to do that, he chose a lonely path. He resigned from his professorship, gave up his pension, and spent the rest of his life wandering, living in modest rented rooms across Switzerland, Italy, and France. Plagued by chronic illness, near blindness, and excruciating migraines, he wrote in pain, thought in silence, and created in exile. He was not surrounded by friends or accolades. Most of his books were ignored. His letters often went unanswered. And yet, the ideas he wrote in solitude would one day shake the foundations of modern thought. Perhaps his most misunderstood idea. Nietzsche didn't celebrate the death of God. He mourned it. He saw that traditional religion was losing its grip on modern life and feared the spiritual vacuum it would leave behind. Without God, he warned, we would need to become creators of our own values, or risk falling into nihilism. For Nietzsche, the core of human life wasn't just survival. It was the drive to become, to overcome, to shape the world and ourselves. The will to power isn't domination over others. It's mastery over oneself. It's the courage to say, I choose meaning. I create direction. I will not be small. Not a superior race, but a superior spirit. A person who breaks free from inherited beliefs and dares to live by their own inner law. The Übermensch isn't a hero for the world. They're a guide for the self. In a collapsing moral order, Nietzsche believed we must each become our own compass. A thought experiment. If you had to live your exact life again and again, forever, would you say yes to it? Could you love your fate so much that you would choose it eternally? Nietzsche didn't give us an answer. He gave us a mirror. But these ideas were not born from books. They were born from heartbreak. Nietzsche fell in love deeply and was rejected. He tried to connect and was misunderstood. He gave his life to words, and they cost him everything. In 1889, while walking the streets of Turin, Nietzsche saw a horse being beaten in the street. He ran to it, threw his arms around the animal, and broke down sobbing. After that moment, he collapsed, mentally and emotionally. He would never recover. For the last 11 years of his life, Nietzsche lived in silence, cared for by his mother and sister. He died in 1900, alone, forgotten, broken. And yet, from that silence, his voice grew louder. His books, once ignored, became landmarks of thought. His words inspired generations, not just philosophers, but artists, writers, psychologists, revolutionaries. Freud, Jung, Camus, Foucault. Even modern therapy owes something to Nietzsche's deep understanding of suffering and self. But more than his theories, what continues to live is his voice. Nietzsche doesn't comfort the masses. He speaks to the ones who lie awake at night, who feel out of place in the crowd, who think too much and feel too deeply. He doesn't tell you what to believe. He asks if you're willing to believe in yourself. He doesn't promise peace. He invites you into the storm and shows you how to walk through it. He doesn't offer easy answers. He teaches you to love the weight of your own questions. Nietzsche's greatest gift is not clarity, it's courage. Courage to think for yourself, to suffer without turning bitter, to stand alone without losing your voice, to keep becoming. And perhaps, if he were here today, he wouldn't ask if you were happy, or successful, or understood. He might ask something quieter, more dangerous, more sacred. If you had to live this exact life again and again forever, would you say yes? And maybe, just maybe, he'd whisper, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. And so, we return to the question, what becomes of a man who sees further than his time can follow? Nietzsche lived without applause. He wrote books that were mocked, ignored, or misunderstood. He reached for eternal truths while living in temporary obscurity. And yet, his words, born in solitude, have outlived centuries of noise. Because while the world rushed forward, Nietzsche looked inward. He turned pain into philosophy, loneliness into wisdom, suffering into a strange, sacred kind of strength. In him, we find a voice for the exiles, those who walk through life with open wounds and open eyes. He speaks not to crowds, but to the quiet places inside us that no one else sees. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. This sentence isn't just a quote, it's a compass for the lost, a whisper for the hurting, a torch for those trapped in tunnels without light. Nietzsche never promised that life would be easy. He didn't believe in comfort as a goal. Instead, he asked us to become, to stand face to face with the chaos of existence and craft from it something meaningful, even beautiful. He believed that meaning is not given. It must be created, forged in fire, hammered from heartbreak, and chosen over and over again, even when the world makes you doubt it. So why does Nietzsche still matter? Because his questions haven't aged. Because his courage still humbles us. Because somewhere, right now, someone is walking the same lonely road, wondering if their thoughts are too heavy, if their depth is a burden, if they'll ever be seen. And in that moment, Nietzsche's voice returns. Not loud, not demanding, just present. A mirror, a murmur, a friend across time. Become who you are. This was his quiet command, not a destination, but a lifelong becoming. He never gave a map, only the terrifying, beautiful task of drawing your own. He reminds us that to live authentically is to risk being misunderstood, that to think deeply is to often feel alone. But that solitude is not the enemy, it is the crucible of becoming. In the silence of exile, Nietzsche found his voice, and maybe in hearing it, we find pieces of our own. So if you are still watching this, perhaps you too have felt like an outsider. Perhaps you've carried questions that made you feel isolated, or longings that made the world seem too loud, too fast, too shallow. And if so, this video is for you. Not to explain everything, but to hold space for what cannot be explained. To remind you that thinking deeply is not a flaw, that feeling deeply is not a weakness, and that truth, your truth, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. If this story stirred something in you, a thought you didn't know how to name, a wound that suddenly felt seen, a silence that no longer felt empty, then don't let it end here. Like this video, if it helped you breathe just a little easier. Share it with someone who walks through their own quiet struggle. And subscribe, not for algorithms, but for something more human. This channel isn't about chasing trends. It's about chasing truth, your truth. Because this channel isn't trying to go viral. It's trying to go inward, to meet you where your words end and your truth